This video is a recorded webinar that the very generous and helpful Pamela McIntyre of the EPA AQS Help Desk agreed to have recorded for us, in which she explains in every transaction, which is every row of the data that we upload into AQS, the order of the characters and what those mean, and how to read the AMP 500 report, which is a listing of all the different protocol codes and combinations for the samplers at your sites, and the AMP 501 report, which is a download of the raw data, and what those mean and their correspondence with AQS forms, as Pamela will show us.
Okay, so where I'm going to go is, this is the AQS website that everyone here already knows about and has logged into a lot. And where I'm going to go is under all the manuals and guides. And in particular, I want to look at the AQS Transaction Formats. So this page describes the input transaction formats for AQS data. So before we even go down to the AQS, the different formats, above it, they talk about how to read them. If you ever, get stuck, this is just a great resource. It's just a couple of paragraphs. They say the first field of all the input formats in the transaction, such as RD, RC, or MA, indicates the type of data in the record. These are the valid transaction types. The second field is actually the action indicator. And in this case, in the example they have here, they have U for update. And they tell you U is for update, D is for delete, and so forth, which indicates the requested database manipulation action. So basically, this is the action indicator, which tells you how you're going to manipulate that data that you're going to put in this transaction. In this case, they're going to update. Okay, the next block of fields is the primary key information, which usually includes the state code. And if you don't have a state code, it's going to be the tribal code. So always remember that if you see a tribal code, it's in the position that you normally would have a state code field, state indicator. So if you don't have a state code in that field, you'll always have the tribal indicator. And that tribal indicator is going to be TT. If you have a state code, you're going to have a county code. If you have a tribal indicator, you're going to have a tribal code. Tribes that see TT, but they're not sure what that TT is, that's your tribal indicator, and following it is going to be your tribal code. Okay, after that, you'll have the site ID, the parameter, and POC. And then it may also include assessment type or agency identifier. So this combination of fields, the state, county, site, parameter, and POC. Okay, all transactions are going to be pipe delimited. So this line that you see between each field are your pipes. If you need to report a given field as a null or having nothing in it, then all you have to do is place two delimiters back to back. So these fields have nothing in them, and so basically you just have one pipe and then another pipe, and then that field's empty right there. Also, a delimiter does not need to follow the final field in a record. So there should always be one less delimiter than the fields for a given transaction type. The final field in a record actually does not have a need to have a delimiter. Another thing is when you're changing a record, you can populate all the required fields. And once the required fields are included, you don't have to supply any non-required information. When we look at a couple of the transactions, you're going to see that it's going to tell you which fields are required and which fields aren't required. So when you want to populate a record, all you really need are those required fields. You don't need any of the fields that aren't required. And you could ignore empty trailing delimiters in that row as long as none of these fields are required. And so this is actually all that's required. And in order to see the full rules, you would go to the data coding manual. Let me get into tribal mode. All you have to do is click on the button here and then type in, you can just type in part of the word, and I'm just going to type in part of it. And that didn't give me enough. Okay. So La Posta define. So there it is. So you just type that in, and you can just type in part of it like I did and bring it up. And then just, it's already selected, and click OK. And then all you have to do is hit your tab key, because you don't need the state and county, and put in your site ID. So I'm just going to click on my execute query button and see what site comes up. Okay, here it is. So when you look at this screen right here is actually that basic site data transaction, basic site data. That's that one transaction that we looked at. And I'm just going back there. So this one transaction, site basic, you see that it has your, well, that's the beginning part, your county site, and then it has latitude, longitude, UTM, scroll down, source, vertical measure, time zone, agency code, street address, city code, and so forth. And then when we go here, we see that this is the information that's there. City code, time zone. Yeah, basically this is that transaction right here. Now, not everything in AQS you can run in batch, and I believe the additional, there's no transaction for this screen that I know of. For the agency roles, I believe you have to actually do that online. What else did it? Traffic count, year of traffic. So let's go back over here, and it gives tangent row, road names, direction street, traffic count, day, year traffic, source. So that's that transaction. Then you have the open path, and you see site open path, this transaction. That's this form right here. So once again, if you want to look up a tribe, okay, so 1011. So here's one, and that monitor basic, you know, your state, county, or tribe, and tribal indicator and tribal code. And then further down, you have your measurement scale, your probe height. So, you know, if you just want to see, oh, this is that form, and so you'll see like your probe height, yeah, measurement scale. So that's this one. So basically, most of those transactions match up to the forms in AQS. We consider this a form in AQS. And the same with sample period, monitor sampling period. That's whenever you see a record that begins with MB, that's going to be your monitor and sample period. And that's going to give you all the information that we looked at before. And this one only has 9 fields on it. And that's how this record looks. Each one of these transactions, you can line them up to the forms in AQS, type assignment, network affiliation, agency roles, and so forth.
When you open an AMP or AMP 500 or 501 report, you'll see rows that have the beginning character a pound sign, and that indicates that row is a comment.
Basically, those comments show you each one of those fields that are in this record. The fields that we looked at, the action code, the state code, the county, the latitude, longitude, the ones that we looked at that we broke down into which ones were required and so forth. And so this breaks it down and tells you each one of those fields. Now, below that, below your comments, which are all these pound signs, you may not have all these records in your file. The comments are going to be printed every time you run this report. They're going to just give you all the records in the file as a comment, just so you can have all those records would be there. Below that is your actual data. And what you can do, you can match up your actual data to the record that's like AA goes with AA. The pound sign is just to signify that this AA is a comment, and this is your data. The one without the pound is your data. And so if you don't know, like for instance, let's say you're not sure what the I is, if you go to the second field in the comment line, that's your action code. So basically, for the AA transaction, you just go across and look at the fields that you may not be familiar with. Like if you saw this, if you said, oh, I'm not sure, what is this field area? And so you know, so after the POC, let's see, what do we have? The site ID. After the site ID, we actually have the latitude, so that would be here. So all you're doing is matching. These are just comments. Sometimes it can get kind of hard because the transaction's long. They're going to give you every field, and so you actually have to scroll over. If you just want to look at the structure of the monitor and see when it was reporting and so forth, I think this is a good way. When that site was established, who the supporting role, also the primary roles and stuff like that, then I think that's good. You can look here, but you may be able to dwindle it down so you don't have to look at all this at one time to find your answer. And one way you could do that is there were a couple of records in here, and I can show you real quick in the database. Sometimes if you don't know if you've loaded data with a particular protocol before, the best place to check it, I think, is you can check it by looking at the screen, by looking at the protocols, which I'm actually, let's see, what was for that particular one, what record was that? Is there a record? Let's see, sampling, tangent, instruction, collocation method. So the method would be one you would want to look at, but the protocols, it looks like there's no record for that, so you would look at that online. So the methods, if you want to know if you're accepting that method, then you would look at the transaction. And like, for instance, here's one down here, the transaction. And so that tells you what method you use and from what date, start date. Looks like you're still using that method, 170. And actually, you were right, because this one shows she has 88101 Part 2, and she closed it. Sometimes they could still be open, but it looks like she closed this 2004, 526 to 2013, 616. So yeah, you definitely can find historical information on your monitor this way. Remember, those records apply to everything that's online. So if we went into AQS and looked at that, her method, if we just go to the Methods tab, that's that record we were looking at. And this isn't the monitor, though. Let me go to the monitor. Okay, 3. And go to the methods. And
the method, or the 105 is the units.
Oh, I'm not at the right one. Sorry. First one, the way I remember which one is the method and stuff, it actually spells out DUM, D-U-M. Duration is this one. U is the unit, and M is the method. So it spells DUM, D-U-M. Or you can think of something else that spells. And when you go to in AQS, you can just look at, if you want to know what protocol you use to get your data loaded into AQS. We have a few more seconds. I want to look at the AMP 501. Anything that begins with the pound sign is a comment. Anything that doesn't begin with the pound sign is your data. The I is the action indicator, and RD stands for raw data. I is the action code, which is insert. TT is your tribal indicator, which is actually says state code in this field. The tribal indicator, tribal code, then the site, parameter, and POC. And then you can spell out DUM, D-U-M, the date, and then you have the start time, and then the sample value. And then the rest are blank, but if you want to know what each one of these fields are, all you have to do is follow for the type of record. And our next field after the sample value is going to be your null data code. Well, we don't have a null data code. The next field after that is going to be the sampling frequency, which is right here.
Thank you, Pamela.